What's the class time? So it is April 23rd, 6 o'clock. Class 5 tonight, out of total of 7 classes. Next week, we're gonna go a little bit extra because of the presentations. And tonight, we're not gonna get all the way through what we got here, but we'll get through enough where you'll at least have a general idea of what we're doing here. So Josh and I are gonna ping pong back and forth. I am committed to a 7 o'clock time with you guys. And so I always try to honor that. And let me see if I can get it up here. So it's we're gonna talk a little bit about a couple things tonight. We're going to talk about basically societal and mental poverty, and basically we're going to talk a little bit about how trauma and homelessness kind of work a little bit hand in hand. And a little bit of this can, sometimes people have had a lot of trauma in their lives, and when you actually talk about it, it can make them tailspin a little bit. So if you feel like we're if you want to turn the audio off at certain points, that's fine. We're not trying to make anybody feel bad. We're actually trying to help people understand things a little better. Homelessness, is it getting better or worse? In the longer term, better, in the shorter term, worse. And California is leading the way, as we do on most things. This is a graph on homelessness through 2018. The problem is there's no really good graphs yet on through 2022 because of COVID, and it just makes everything kind of strange. And but the long-term trends were down. And we're gonna actually show a video here in a minute because it's actually really good about trauma. Trauma leaves a lasting imprint on your brain. People affected by trauma can be re-traumatized in reaction to a conversation that seems harmless to most people, like this class. Even trauma from early childhood can affect people through their life, through their whole lives. So let me see if I can find where I put that.
You see a lot of that trauma in the homeless community, especially from veterans who served in the military at some point, and they're dealing with PTSD from their experiences in the war. You see how traumatizing it is for them, and a lot of them aren't able to recover just because they don't have the resources or the help that they need.
Very good point. Very good point. Oopsie. You got to turn on all this stuff here. Here we go.
Is that there's a difference between trauma and stress.
You guys can hear that okay, is that correct?
Yeah.
Most important thing to know is that there's a difference between trauma and stress. As I like to say to people, life sucks a good amount of the time. We all have jobs and situations that are really unpleasant. But the moment that situation is over, it's over. The problem with trauma is that when it's over, your body continues to relive it. My name is Bessel van der Kolk. I'm a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and author of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I got interested in trauma on my first day working at the Veterans Administration. 1978 was the year, and the Vietnam War was over by about 6 or 7 years. The very first day that I met Vietnam veterans, I was just blown away. These were guys who were my age, who who were clearly smart and competent and athletic, and they clearly were just a shadow of their former self. Their bodies were clearly affected by trauma, and they had a very hard time connecting with new people after the war. Around that time, a group of us started to define what trauma is. And in the definition of PTSD, we write, these people have been exposed to an extraordinary event that's outside of normal human experience. In retrospect, that shows us how ignorant and narrow-minded we were, because it turned out that this is not an unusual experience at all. People usually think about the military when they talk about trauma, but at least 1 out of 8 kids in America witness physical violence between their parents. A larger number of kids get beaten very hard by their own caregivers. A very large number of people in general, but women in particular, have sexual experiences that were clearly unwanted and that left them confused and enraged. So, unlike what we first thought, trauma is actually extremely common. There's a lot of debate of what a trauma is to this day. But basically, trauma is something that happens to you that makes you so upset that it overwhelms you. There is nothing you can do to stave off the inevitable. You basically collapse in a state of confusion, maybe rage, because you are unable to function in the face of this particular threat. But the trauma is not the event that happens, the trauma is how you respond to it. One of the largest mitigating factors against getting traumatized is who is there for you at that particular time. When, as a kid, you get bitten by a dog, it's really very scary and very nasty. But if your parents pick you up and say, "Oh, I see that you're really in bad shape, let me help you," that dog bite doesn't become a big issue because the foundation of your safety has not been destroyed. We are profoundly interdependent people, and as long as our relationships are intact, by and large, we're pretty good with trauma. It's a subjective experience, and what may be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me, depending on our personality and our prior experiences. The problem with trauma is that it starts off with something that happens to us, but that's not where it stops, because it changes your brain. Much of the imprint of trauma is in that very primitive survival part of your brain that I like to call the cockroach brain. There's a part of you that just picks up what's dangerous and what's safe. And when you're traumatized, that little part of your brain, which is usually very quiet, continues to just send messages. I'm in danger. I'm not safe. That event itself is over, but you continue to react to things as if you're in danger. We're talking about survival. We're talking about staying alive. And so some people go into fight-flight, or on a more primitive level, people's brain shuts down and they collapse. You have these automatic responses that are not a product of your cognitive assessment, they're a product of your animal brain trying to stay alive in the face of something that part of your brain interprets as a life threat. And the problem then becomes that you are not able to engage, or to learn, or to see other people's point of view, or to coordinate your feelings with your thinking. Traumatized people have a tremendous problem experiencing pleasure and joy. But the core issue is our hormones and our physiological impulses that have to do with survival. Your body keeps mobilizing itself to fight. You have all kinds of immunological abnormalities, endocrine abnormalities, and that really devastates your physical health also. Oftentimes the physical problems are longer lasting than the mental problems. And the other thing that is terribly important is the impact of poverty, or the impact of racism, or the impact of unemployment. There's other societies that are much more trauma savvy than we are, where there is not an enormous amount of income inequality. Healthcare is universal, childcare is universal. A culture like that really looks at what are the antecedents for certain forms of pathology. So the big issue is a political issue. How do we rearrange our society to really know about trauma so that people who grow up under extreme adverse conditions can become full-fledged members of society? The sense of community and people being there for each other is a critical part of surviving and thriving.
Get smarter faster with new videos every week.
Okay, so that kind of gives you an overview of trauma. I don't always, I share a lot of stuff with you guys. I don't always agree with everything I share, but we try to give you a kind of a wide scope on things and different opinions. Even after this class, I'll email out a short clip on homelessness from a little bit different perspective. So we just try to give you the range and let you decide, where to fit it into generosity and in your own personal way you look at life. So anyway, let's start sharing again so we get through this stuff. And this guy. Let's see, what did I share? And let me go back to stop share. Let me make sure I shared the right thing. There we go. So, basically, his point was everybody suffers from trauma, especially if you, like Josh was saying, in the military. There's a test called ACE, and it's been developed over the last 30 years to help people score a little bit. Scoring kind of gives people a little bit of, I think, better understanding. Not so much that you want to put people in boxes, but you want to, if you do it right, you want to learn how to understand people better. And if it causes some issues on this, with any of you, feel free to walk away for about 5 minutes. Questions 1 to 5, when you were a child, was a family member incarcerated? Basically, there's a group of 10 questions, and these 10 questions help give a score to some trends. And so these are the 10 questions. Was a family member incarcerated? Was a family member an alcoholic or drug abuser? Was a family member mentally ill or attempted suicide? Did you experience loss of a parent, either through divorce, death, or adoption, fostering? Was one of your parents physically abused by the other? Were you physically abused often or very often? Were you humiliated or insulted by a parent? Were you touched in a sexual way by someone more than 5 years older than yourself? Did you often go hungry or have to wear dirty clothes or out of style clothes? I think is another way to put it. Did you often feel that no one in your house thought you were important? And so those are some pretty brutal questions, especially when you have to answer yes. The distribution on the scoring was people that had 0 of these events was 36%, And the people that had 4 of these events was 12% or 1 in 8. And then there's numbers in the middle. So basically, I think if you take a look at it, 52% of the people that take the test have a 0 or a 1. And then the ones over that, it starts getting into that a little bit more. Here's how it kind of correlates with homelessness. If your score is 6 or more, that's really up there. There's a much better chance, about a 1 in 3 chance, that you may experience homelessness. And so a little bit of tying in this ACE score with homelessness kind of helps us get a little bit better understanding of people that are experiencing or have experienced homelessness. Here's some more numbers. People who scored 4 or more compared to people who didn't score any, they're 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with bipolar, 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with chronic depression, 6 times more likely to abuse illicit drugs, and 10 times more likely to commit suicide. And I think in our country right now, we're in kind of a suicide epidemic. And it's something that is terribly concerning, because it means people have given up and they don't want to live anymore. They're done. A few more statistics. Again, people who scored 4 or more compared to the 0 people. And number 1 here is the one that, when we said who's most likely to be in poverty in our country, the answer that nobody got was people that didn't have a high school diploma. And so not getting the high school diploma is a pretty big deal. And people that have a lot of trauma events in their lives have a lot more likelihood of not being high school graduates. So I think, as you kind of just learn a little bit about life, is if people that are kids that maybe won't be graduating from high school, is maybe do everything you can to try to help them to move through high school. Twice as likely to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to regularly miss work, 4 times more likely to they have serious problems performing work. This is some of the science that's behind it, and basically a lot of it is the chemicals in our brains take over sometimes when there's traumatic events. A double bind is when the child's caregiver is also the traumatizer. That's like the person closest to you, nurturing you, is also your abuser. And so it's like almost like 2 points in one. It's a double, twice as awful event. The healthy cycle is child has a need, caregiver meets a need, the child feels comfort, and instead the caregiver is the traumatizer. The child is not comforted, obviously, and the brain gets confusion. The child will develop coping mechanism that lasts way through adulthood. If I feel discomfort, I won't be comforted, is the kind of the message the brain gets. And even after many healthy cycles, the brain doesn't learn. It's like the pain and the event of trauma, even with all kinds of counseling, prayer, therapy, sometimes it just stuck there in the back of your mind. And it's kind of like how we deal with life. Sometimes we, maybe even at our job, we do 98% good, and the 2% is what we remember, the part where we failed. It's just how we move to that. Mirror neurons. Your body subconsciously mirrors the emotions of people you are in contact with. That's why you smile when someone smiles. You fold your arms, you yawn, and that's why you have certain reactions when you watch TV or movies. our brains mirror trauma long before we develop reasoning skills. Trauma can be experienced in the womb and during childbirth, and infants feel anxiety, anger, and fear from their parents. So it starts really young. Well, any questions so far? I know we're flying through this, and it's a subject that you could have 10 classes on it and still have a long ways to go with understanding all this, but this is the view from about 30,000 feet high, just an overview of trauma and how it relates to homelessness. And Josh, why don't you go ahead and take a couple here? I'll let you take it.
Okay,
Yeah.
are you still gonna operate the PowerPoint?
Okay. You're too slow, I'll just keep moving.
So trauma-informed interactions. If you knew ahead of time you were interacting with someone with a high trauma background, you might behave a certain way. 1, you might have more patience. 2, you might speak more gently. And 3, you might give them more second chances because you have a better idea and understanding of where they're coming from, right?
This is often helpful in the job environment if you're a supervisor or manager. It helps you understand and have more patience. The quandary becomes how do you make it work in a work environment and have some rules? And how do you stretch the rubber band a little bit to help this person? And how do you have people that work that you supervise, maybe how maybe can you help them understand a little bit, and you're still being fair to everybody? That's always the difficult part.
Right. And it's good just to show people mercy and grace the first time, because you never know what kind of day they're having. You never know what someone's going through. I work a lot with children in my past at nonprofits and things like that. And, the kids who are acting up, it's usually because they just lost a parent or they just went through something at home and you had no idea. And what are you going to do? You're going to take out your anger on this kid, or you're going to show him mercy and love and get to know him and ask him what's going on. And when they open up to you, you realize like, oh, I understand why he's acting out now. It's most of the time it's a cry for help. Work life versus home life, healing at work or home, and safe or healing at work or at home or work. It's the best chance of emotional growth. Unsafe at work or home, and then healing at home or work. This is survival, but this is no emotional growth here. So it's if you're trying to heal at home, but then you're going to work and it's a traumatic experience going on at work, you're just spinning your cycles. Whatever healing you did at home or work, when you go to the other environment, it just undoes all the work that you just did. So you're just in a constant cycle at this point, but there's no growth. So work or home is safe, but not healing. So it's you have a safe space, but there's no healing going on. And then on the other side, work or home is unsafe. Now you're slowly deteriorating. You're slowly going backwards because there's no healing taking place from these traumatic events that happened in your life. So you're just on a slippery slope going backwards and downhill at this point. Unsafe at work and you're unsafe at home, then your spirals out emotionally, prefers or chooses to be homeless. This is a very rapid process of you just spiraling downhill at this point. There's nowhere you could go that's safe. There's nowhere you can go where you're healing. So there's nothing you can do to deal with that traumatic events that took place in your life. There's nothing to deal with it. You're constantly just spiraling downhill at that point.
This is where kids might leave home early, because they just want out, and basically they don't have great options and they live on the streets. They get involved with sex trafficking, drug trafficking, all kinds of things. And the thing that we have to, if we're if we scored well on this test, is what we want to be careful of is giving them a lot of room for grace and understanding, realizing that recovery is very long and difficult still. But at least it gives you, you know, a little bit more understanding. Hopefully it makes you a little more giving person.
Yeah, and just me personally, I scored a 6. I'll tell you guys my personal score on those 10 questions it asked. I was a 6 out of 10. You know, statistically speaking, 1 in 3 chance I should have been homeless. Thank God I'm not, of course. It turned out pretty okay, but you know, I was able to go to college, I was able to start a business and things like that, but I did suffer from some of those traumatic events that I experienced growing up. You know, I was addicted to substances at 16 years old. I had emotional abuse I never healed from. I didn't know how to treat others in a respectable way due to some of the things I went through. And it took a lot of a healing process and getting around people who could love me through that process and putting myself in safe environments to be able to overcome those things. And a lot of people don't have families or opportunities or access to those type of resources or people to heal. And that's why it's so important just to have grace and mercy on people, because you never know what they've been through. And if you guys believe in the Bible, it says love conquers all, right? So that's the best thing you could do for some of those people is just love them through it. So top reasons for homelessness, short term is emergency shelter. So they might have had just experienced a job loss or unsafe housing conditions, like Dan was saying, especially children. Let's say they're getting beat at home or something, they just leave the house. They need emergency shelter. Medium term is transitional housing. There's family conflict, runaways, domestic violence, recent incarceration, just getting out of jail, and they need somewhere to stay right now. That's a transitional housing. Long-term permanent housing, substance abuse, and mental illness. So these are some of the top reasons for homelessness: short-term, medium-term, and long-term.
One of the, I was gonna reflect back to Josh on the scores that he said he's got 6 on. One of the good things about learning about this is if you can give yourself a break, because a lot of times we're the hardest on ourselves, as opposed to anybody in life, really. And so if you've gone through some of those experiences and you get into a dark place or a place of discomfort, I think it helps you realize you're not, it's normal, really. It's not something that, you know, we're responsible people, but we also are human beings. And so it helps you realize there may be a way out. And I always tell people, if you get really super depressed, to the point where you want to take your own life or hurt yourself, always try to have a plan ahead of time of a person you can call or talk to that can listen and can kind of walk you back from the ledge, especially if you have those tendencies, because that's what you'll need at a certain point. But there's benefit in being educated about the good and the bad, because when you're in a place where it's not good, you have a better chance of recovery.
Right.
Homelessness and substance abuse, is it possible that our brains lead us into homelessness and substance abuse due to trauma? If so, how should this affect how we look at these problems? How should this affect how we interact with people? I have a case right now. We're doing a Power Week trip to Mexico, and I'm always looking to help people become leaders or small leaders, small supervisors. And one of the ways I do that on the trip is I have 5 vans of people, and so I make van leaders or van drivers the leader of their van. And I had one person that I asked him if he would like to do that, and he said yes. I've been asking him to go. He's been a GU grad for a while, and I've been encouraging him or asking him or bugging him, whatever you want to call it, to go on a trip somewhere. And he said he wanted to go to Mexico, and he also said be happy to be a van driver for me. And then he disappeared on me. A couple days later, I couldn't get a hold of him. And I couldn't get a hold of him through calling, texting, or whatever, and he was at work. And then I found out that he really had an alcohol problem. And so, you know, my goal always has been with him that I don't want him to feel the pressure of having to be driving a van and feeling that stress, but I just want him to come and hang out with us.
Right.
But the company, you know, wants him doing some counseling and things like that, but you're always going to take risks when you try to help people grow and mature. And this helps a little bit in that piece where you realize, you know, he's probably a 40-year-old guy, and you realize that people really have to work through some of these really bad, these things that become very harmful in their lives. Go ahead, Josh, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, I was gonna ask you actually, have you guys came up with any solutions for that case right now? Or have you guys been able to get him into any type of therapy or rehab, or, you know, how's that looking?
We took him off the Mexico list. I think he took himself off.
Okay,
And the COO of the company wanted him to go to AA meetings.
uh-huh,
And so I think those guys, I didn't know he had a substance abuse problem like that.
yeah,
I'm not sure, you know, sometimes I have an idea. But really what the COO wants, he says, hey, we're not gonna fire you, but we want you working on it. You know,
right.
and there's a way to do it, so.
And that
And
speaks a lot to the owner's heart too, because how many different corporations would just cut the guy and fire him and just cut ties with him? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
just the fact you guys are trying to help him as a human, not as an employee. You guys are looking out for him as a human being. I love that.
Right. And what's the best way to help these people? There you go. Stage one is and what we're saying here is what's the best way for organizations, like some of the ones you guys have shared with us tonight. A lot of them are doing some of the stuff. Is number one, stage one is meet the immediate needs by first aid, shelter. You know, these days it's really cold. We work with groups up in Red Bluff, California. And the churches there work really well together, about 10 of them. And when it gets really cold in November, those churches have a plan where they rotate where people can stay overnight. And they do that for like 3 months, 3 or 4 months, because it's so cold outside. And so it really blesses my heart, because what I know of churches is we all get really territorial, let's just put it that way. And you know, it's not like the grace of Jesus. And it's just really cool to me to see those in many ways those churches working together to take care of a very real need. How did we get here? Some of the generational shifts from the 60s to the 80s, free-range childhoods, unchaperoned by adults. That's the way it used to be. Learning from life experiences, both good and bad. That's a lot the way it used to be. And free-range childhood, that's what a lot of parents, some of them are trying to get back to that, where kids just, you know, you have to live a little more in the country where kids just can be kids and just have a home in time, and you know, they're responsible. They can be free-range kids. They can learn life just with freedom. From the 1990s to the present, there's been a real rise in crime, especially directed at children, become much more prominent, and we're really seeing a brutal way these days. And with one issue politically, that's just you know, the destruction of kids physically. Effort to rein in kids and keep them safe, that's been the overprotectiveness of safety. That was brought to my attention. One thing that just drives me crazy is car seats. Like when my kids were growing up, I had one car seat and it was good for 3 or 4 years, however long the kid, didn't was big enough for the seat. And these days I think you have to get a new one every year. I'm going,
Yeah,
really?
it's like state law, right?
It's like, I saw a recycle bin for car seats the other day and I go, this is ridiculous. We just make rules to make rules. Probably the
Yeah.
lobby for car seats got a bunch of laws passed. And
Those
now,
things aren't cheap either.
yeah, and people that are poor or just, getting by, gotta go spend another $150 on a car seat. I go, that's just, it's overdone. But in a lot of ways, I think that's how COVID was. We're so afraid and we live in such fear that, something that's, 1%, 0.5%, 0.1% just brings us to a halt. I go, man, we're afraid of, we're just living in fear.
Right. And one thing to mention too about some of the trends when you're a child. Remember, like when we were children, it was just, hey, be home before the street lights turn on. That was it. And you could leave the house and be gone all day. Your parents don't know where you are. You didn't have a cell phone to check in. But you were okay. Nowadays, you wouldn't dare think about letting a child, live with those same rules. It's crazy how fast this world has changed and shifted it as far as children go.
The message below is life is dangerous. Adults will protect you both from strangers and from other kids and from anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. I think that was one of the issues too, with everybody getting a trophy is we tended to cheapen trophies for one thing. And it's just a matter of trying to protect. I mean, it's painful when you don't get a trophy, but that's just how life is. You don't win every single thing you try. And doing stuff like this really doesn't let the growing up kid experience the joy of overcoming pain, really, in a lot of things. Transitioning to adulthood is a desire to continually overprotect, protection from actual physical harm to even words and ideas that make us feel uncomfortable. This fosters self-righteousness, close-mindedness, moral crusades, hostility, and the death of critical thinking. I mean, we're so paranoid about language right now that it's like it's insane. And so basically what people do now is they just don't say anything, and it's all in their minds. And we've harmed ourselves because even if you say something maybe that's offensive to somebody, somebody's going to say something that's offensive to you, and like it's okay. It's like you can't. It's almost in a way people trying to create eternal life in the world, and there just is no such thing. Go ahead, Josh.
So the loss of critical thinking. Long-standing educational theory. Don't teach students what to think, teach them how to think. Strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, weak minds discuss people. Oh, I like that one. That's a good quote right there by Socrates. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. This is disappearing in higher education. Now they're telling you what to think. They're telling you how to think. They're telling you what's right, what's wrong. They're eliminating this out of school. And even, I'm sure Hannah and Owen could kind of speak to this too, but even when I was in college about 6 years ago, it's not a lot of open discussion nowadays. It's more of just studying an exact content. There's one right answer. And this is slowly leaving the educational system in the United States, and I'm sure amongst the whole world right now.
The thing you want people to do, and even in your own life, let's say you're conservative or you're liberal or you're whatever, is maybe try to, in debate classes, a lot of times what they do is they make you take the position that you don't agree with, and you have to debate and take that position. And there's a lot of benefit to doing that. Because then it strengthens your position and how you feel it, or it changes your mind to something that you need to have your mind changed on. When we do GU trips, I like to, if I can, figure out ways to share the different faiths of a country and how they see life and how they see their worldview, because that strengthens people's convictions if they have the truth. And so I think there's a lot to be said for listening to people, how they see it, how they see God, how they see life, how they see eternity, and then trying to discover the truth and encouraging people that you share with or listen to, try to encourage them in their discovery of truth and generosity and all these things that we deal with. So the impact is that kids are less prepared to handle life's challenges, emotionally fragile, unable to cope with stress, constantly seeking safe spaces, migration to either isolation or surrounding themselves with like-minded people, which is tribalism. Let's look at the bottom one. Teaching kids that failures, insults, and painful experiences will do no lasting damage is harmful in and of itself. Human beings need physical and mental challenges and stressors, or we deteriorate. For example, Josh is a salesman, and salesmen encounter a lot of rejection. And the thing that a healthy salesman learns to do is how to be able to handle rejection and be healthy about it and be healthy about himself. Because the top salesman isn't going to sell more than 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 in most cases. And the salesmen that aren't so strong maybe just get 1 out of 10. But it depends, of course, on your product and the things that you're selling. But I always love, one of the things I've always loved about seeing how people can mature is I always encourage people coming out of college to go get a sales job, because it helps them understand the reality of how people have to make money, how they have to get income, how they have to pay bills, how there's no guarantees on money. And it just makes them healthier people in the long run. Not everybody listens to me, but I try. Tribalism. Tell us about that a little bit.
The rise of tribalism. Tribe, a group of people that feel connected to each other in a meaningful way because they share something in common that matters to them. The group allows them to make the distinction of US or of us, members of the group, and them. Tribalism is a pattern of attitudes and behaviors we tend to adopt when we come to identify with our tribes. Herding people can migrate to tribes to find safe places. And this is what we were talking about earlier, having a safe place or a place where you can heal. These can be AA classes. This could be a church. This could just be a close group of friends, a sorority, for example. This could be so many different things. Depending on the tribal identity, a person can find themselves further isolated from society. It can lead to greater difficulty integrating into society, greatly facilitated by social media. So both the physical and the electronic isolation from people we disagree with allow the forces of confirmation bias, groupthink, and tribalism to push us still further apart. So it's actually, sometimes it can be counterproductive because how Dan said, I actually did that assignment in college where our teacher presented us with 2 sides of this case study. We all chose which side we wanted to defend. Whatever side we chose to defend, then the teacher said, okay, I'm making you do the other side. And we had to defend and the other side that we didn't choose. But it was a great assignment. I loved it. It just makes you be so open-minded and just expand your thinking. And this is what this doesn't do. Tribalism can sometimes hinder us from having an open mind because you're just around people who are going to agree with you. And so you're going to become more and more closed-minded if you're only hanging around with people who agree with you every single time. Children who have been social media natives practically all their lives are easily become enraged at each other, prone to judgmentalism and to pursue moral campaigns, and are stunted socially and cannot integrate well in adulthood.
6
Social-
ways
Oh, go ahead.
social media can affect mental health. It's addictive. It triggers more sadness, less well-being. Yeah, comparison. This one's really one of the top ones. Comparing our lives with others is mentally unhealthy, especially because everybody posts their best side.
It's a highlight reel.
It's a highlight reel. It can lead to jealousy and a vicious circle. More friends on social media doesn't mean you're more social. Strangers are interacting with our kids. And that's really a very dangerous part. The sex trafficking, sextortion, things like that happen because strangers are intercepting the kids on their phones. TikTok really is something that's pretty popular, but it's becoming a real concern because the TikTok has such short video clips. I think it's down to 5 seconds. And those 5-second clips really can mess up little kids' brains because they have it just takes that attention span and really destroys it. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't use TikTok or whatever. I'm just saying you're wise about what you let your kids do and what you do yourself. And of course, we could spend 10 weeks on TikTok by itself. Got a couple pages here and we're done. The primary cause of the increase in adolescent mental illness is frequent use of smartphones and other electronic devices. Less than 2 hours a day seems to have no deleterious effects, but adolescents who spend several hours a day interacting with screens, particularly if they start in their early teens or younger, have worse mental health outcomes than do adolescents who use these devices less and spend more time in face-to-face interaction. Helping those who are hurting. We're just going to flip through these. Our societies are filled with many souls. Large numbers of children step into adulthood unprepared for life as an adult. Somebody's got a weakness.
We're the secret society of cynics. Everything looks like shit, right?
Let
What if I were to tell you that you're seeing the world the way
me see. Somebody's not muted here. I gotta mute you all.
Elazar, he just muted himself.
I did, okay.
Yeah.
Let me go back to sharing and we'll and basically what we're trying to do is make the world a better place, of course. Taking action begins with each of us as we interact with the world. Each and every day focused on making the world a better place. Government programs can't do everything. They can do a teeny bit. They can address some mounting challenges. Nonprofits and churches that are on the front lines in addressing need our support and more possible our participation. There's 2 books we recommend that deal with trauma and how it affects your brain. And they're both good books. And so that'll be in the notes that I send out to you. And so that's it. I know we flew through this, and sometimes I tell people we just have a lot of stuff, and we can't cover every single thing, but we try to at least give you the notes so you can dive a little bit deeper if you have some interest in some of these areas. So any questions, feedback? There will be a link, a video links you can pick out of the PDF that we send out. Mary's Path is on there. Somebody wanted Mary's path.org. Hopefully you can copy it off your chat. Can you guys all see chat okay? Did we start the recording? Yes, and I need to stop the recording now.